I throw that question out. So do you know how to study and what to study at this point? Should you be knowing how to direct your study? You really should. The study guides I find to be just really helpful. Sometimes people put wrong stuff up and whatever, but most of it's just right on point. And those study guides kind of come from our lecture, which is what you've got to study, right? So it wouldn't be a bad idea to use those. Go back and use those and study. All right. Any questions?
Sorry. What
yes.
should happen if, because the weather's supposed to be bad tomorrow and Thursday?
And Thursday?
I don't know.
Me neither. I'm in denial. So I'll tell you, just personally, I'm just not going to believe it till I see it. And, I know they're pretty good at it nowadays, predicting. But I think my Wednesday class tomorrow's class has a test too scheduled, just worked out that way that I have another class. They're just all praying for snow. They're just praying for snow. So, that's all they could talk about yesterday. But I don't think we're going to be here. We're not going to be here for this test. We got to be ready for it because we might be. So, anyway, what'd you say? So I look, guys. So we'll, if we're delayed, then we'll just, instead of at 9, if we're delayed till 10:30 or even to 12, just be ready to come in and take the test whenever we open that morning on Thursday. Okay, be ready to come in and do it, and that's what we do first, just to get it out of the way. So we'll just wait and see. I think Thursday is less of an issue than tomorrow. I think tonight and tomorrow you guys be really safe. It sounds like it's the scariest stuff. It's the ice, so just be really safe with that. So we'll just see. Did that answer your question? So if we're delayed, as long as we're not delayed past noon. If it's at noon, the school opens at noon, I'll be here giving that test at noon on Thursday. Yeah, I will. And you could expect to be here until at least 2:45 or whatever it was that we have kind of scheduled to be here. The test, is 50 questions, multiple choice. All right. Okay. So let's continue on with our review of the nervous system, though, because after this test Thursday, we're going to continue on then too. And you guys, I would really truly expect that you all over the weekend and before I see you the next Tuesday, that you all would be looking at muscles, certainly looking at muscle anatomy, right? You've got your word bank, don't you? And would you get that same word bank to do your work for the lab? Yep. So you've got your word bank. I expect you to be spending some time with that, but I really expect you to be going back and studying these nervous system notes. Because there will be a lecture quiz on that Tuesday that's really comprehensive about the nervous system. I'll need you all to be up on it, right? Fair enough? Because that test will be soon too, the week after, all right? And it's just the nervous system. But is that yours? Sorry, I thought it was my stuff. All right. Okay, watch me. I'm dangerous. Okay. All right. Sorry, Julie. Okay. All right. So, any questions for me about? Has anybody gotten to see some of this nervous system stuff, and you were wondering about it? And you had any questions about it? No. All right. Well, let's continue on those. Okay. So I've suggested to you that neurons can communicate with other neurons, and so we get that. But we know they can communicate with skeletal muscle, and we talked about motor neurons causing skeletal muscle innervation, didn't we? That was the first part of our story, a functioning motor neuron. But they can also communicate with endocrine glands, which are epithelial tissue, getting those endocrine glands to secrete hormones. So the neurons are pretty darn amazing. When we're thinking about the nervous system, though, we're thinking about these neurons communicating with other neurons. We know that the acetylcholine isn't the only neurotransmitter. There are more than 100 known neurotransmitters, and these different ones that we know that have very specialized functions. Do you think we know everything about their functions? No. It's being, so much stuff is being discovered all the time about neurons that we've known, neurotransmitters that we've known about for a long time, but we're just discovering even different functions that they do. So it's really a new science, and I think that in the next few years, it's just going to kind of blow up. And how wonderful is that? Because really, we probably, it's the nervous system that we probably know the very least about. So this is going to be exciting. Now, I want you to know, and I'm just telling you on the nerve test that you have, you will have to match some functions of these neurotransmitters to what they do. So I think we had kind of stopped talking, when we stopped, we had talked about this. So we said acetylcholine, which we know, okay? So acetylcholine, which we know, it excites skeletal muscles, but it's also going to be a communicator in the central nervous system between neurons. So acetylcholine, we actually kind of already know about. I don't care that you know the organic structure, because I don't think anybody's going to ever ask you to draw them, you know. But we understand that their organic structure dictates their what? Their functions. So that there's somebody that really knows all this stuff is great. I want you to know about epinephrine. Epinephrine is the one that acts as a neurotransmitter and a hormone. And what you would know for its function is that it creates this fight or flight response. It is the main one that we think of for our sympathetic nervous system, which we called our what nervous system? Fight or flight, didn't we? So what happens to vital signs during a fight or flight response? What are some of the vital signs that go up? Blood pressure, heart rate, heart contraction rate, right? Respirations. People call respirations the ventilation rate. So respirations are going to go up, because if you're standing to fight or you're going to run, what are you going to need? Oxygen, which we get from energy. Oxygen we use to get energy, don't we? That third part of aerobic respiration was where oxygen came in, and that's where we get the most ATP for our cells. And we're going to need it, aren't we? So epinephrine we think of for that. Dopamine. Dopamine has different functions depending on its target sites. So I would want you to know that mostly people think of dopamine as being that feel good, that what you feel good. And I think we ended our conversation. What did we stop talking about? What was the end? What was talking about? We didn't remember talking. Yes, we
briefly went over serotonin and
so that's kind of how we ended, isn't it? So this is just a little recap, but make sure you could match these to their functions, okay? And then I wanted you to know that serotonin, you would say, is not the feel good, though sometimes people think that. Serotonin is just to what? To function. It's just a function. So we need serotonin for functioning. So when somebody says that the brain chemistry is off or whatever, and they say that you're depressed, I think people think of that in different kind of terms. It does cause a depression of the entire system because you can't function, right? So please understand that serotonin in the central nervous system is really needed to function. We are on a 24-hour cycle of production of serotonin, and it better be in the right amount. What dictates that? The sun. The sun coming up, and that 24-hour thing. This is why some people have what's called a condition called SAD. They call it SAD. Do y'all know what SAD stands for? Seasonal affective disorder. Seasonal, because during the winter months, what happens to the length of our days? They get much shorter. Is that going to affect your release of serotonin? And some people are incredibly sensitive to that. So what happens is it affects the release of serotonin, and actually serotonin changes to melatonin by evening, and melatonin is hanging around too much. So the problem in seasonal affective disorder is that you have melatonin hanging around too long. And that is what makes people feel like they can't function. right? So it's really increase in melatonin. But anyway, it's just a serotonin melatonin balance is off. So you wonder how people like in certain parts of Alaska and parts of the country where it rains, you know, all the 3 days of the year, something like that, but not really. But you wonder how they function, right? How many of you feel like you're sensitive to that? A few of you feel like you are sensitive to that. I feel like the first time in my life this year, I've been affected by that. Never before have I really kind of understood that, but I feel like this year it's gotten me. But anyway, we should all go outside right now. I see the sun sometime, but guess what we are? We're stuck in the buildings, right?
Warm buildings, though.
What'd you say?
The warm.
Yeah, they are warm. Okay, yes. We'll look at that. So serotonin. Now histamine. I'm going to ask you about histamine. Histamines get a bad name because you always hear about people going and trying to buy what? Antihistamines. Please understand, histamines are not bad. Histamines are good neurotransmitters. These are what they do. This is what three things they do, and I want you to know what they do. I want you to know these three things. Histamines cause vessels to dilate, which means what? Vasodilate means that they do what? They open up. They relax. If they open up, what happens to the pressure inside of them? It drops. If they open, but the volume didn't change, then the pressure inside drops. They also, at the capillary level, become leakier, which means that water can more readily move out of them. So now they've opened up, which relaxed the pressure, but they've also encouraged water to be lost into the tissues, and what does that do to the pressure? Drops it even what? More. Drops it even more, doesn't it? And they initiate pain receptors. They start pain receptors. So is pain a bad thing?
No.
Actually, it's a good thing. So we need histamines for that. We need to know when we stepped on a nail, don't we? We need to know. And when we stepped on that nail, do we need fluids to come to that site? Because when fluids are more blood is coming to that site, fluids are coming to that site, white cells can move into the tissues, nutrients can move into the tissues to help the what process? Healing. So is histamine a bad thing? No. Histamines are good things. And those are the three things that histamines do. Well, you know it. Yes, Brianna.
What was the thing?
They cause vasodilation, increased capillary permeability. You know what that means? It causes capillaries to be leaky. You know, it's what I said. And then also they start pain receptors. All those things, good things to know. All right, now look. I'm not giving you all of these, but I'm giving you some of them that I know that you're going to be actually needing to, that you'll hear about a lot. Endorphins. What do y'all know about endorphins already? Exercise can induce endorphins. You know that that's actually very true. What else do you know about endorphins? Makes you happy?
When you release endorphins, right?
Y'all know what endorphins are. Y'all are all right on this. But do you know what they really are? This is like when people think they know what marijuana is. They don't know what marijuana is. Do y'all know what class of drug marijuana is? Do you know what caffeine's a drug? Do you know what this is a stimulant? This is a stimulant. Do you know what alcohol is? It's a depressant. Even though the first drink tells you, I mean, you're happier, don't you? Okay, look, I'm joking. Okay, I'm joking, but do you know how many young people don't really know that alcohol depresses the nervous system? It depresses the nervous system. What controls all homeostasis? The nervous system, right? All right. Nicotine? Stimulant. THC? Pot?
That's a depressant.
It's everything.
Right?
What'd you say, Dave?
It's a depressant.
That's what I'm saying. How many of you want to say what class of drug it is? How many of you know? Which is a really crying shame since people are making it legal.
It's like this process, like a first class.
No, it's not.
Oh, is that what
It's
you
not
mean?
in the heroin.
Where
That's what
I
analgesics.
thought you meant class like.
I mean, like class, like what does it do?
Oh, I thought you meant like drug class.
Do you know-
like federal drug class. That's
Oh, you mean that's what I was
Oh,
thinking.
yeah,
the same, like,
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about like what does it do to your brain chemistry? What is it doing?
put you to sleep, right? I mean, right? It mellows you out to calm you down. Right?
It's a hallucinogen. I love those faces when I see that because most people don't know that it's a hallucinogen. It's in the same class as LSD, acids. It's a hallucinogen. I can't believe I had the craziest conversation with even my kids when they were teenagers. They were like, "It is not." It's like, who are you talking to? Yes, it is. Look it up. Do the research. It's a hallucinogen. So people might want to know that.
So the whole plant, I guess, if you will, is.
No, not the whole plant. No, just that THC part of it, like the other plant, like the oils and stuff. If the THC, but you know, most people when they're doing pot, either brownies or smoking it, they got the THC. That's a hallucinogen.
Yeah.
What about
And people just argue that they're like, no, that's not true. That's not true. It just mellows you out. It just relaxes you. It just whatever. That might be what it's doing to you, but some people become incredibly paranoid.
Really?
And oh my God, yes.
I'm not very
Yeah. And it's a hallucinogen. Now look, okay, now wait a minute. I'm back on endorphins, which is absolutely endorphins. Let me tell you about endorphins. What do y'all know in the country right now? What is actually killing more people than car accidents and a couple of other things combined? What's killing them? Opioid addiction. So opioid addictions or opioid use. You know, and is it just the person involved or whole families and whole communities involved? And if you look at what's going on in Southwest Virginia right now with children in the K-8 in Southwest Virginia right now, it is just absolutely third world. What is going on in our country, in our backyards? And it's not like we're immune to it either. Y'all all know somebody who has opioid addictions. I know you do. And honestly, I'm going to just let you know, it has nothing to do with our southern borders. Our opioid addictions in this country came from the medical community over-prescribing opiates. So that doesn't give anybody an off for it, but that is really, the medical community needs to take responsibility for that, and they're not stepping up as much as they should be. But that is where this has come from. Now let me say this about you, and heroin, and opiates, and hydrocodone, and OxyContin. If any of you ever hear those words and you would take them after learning a little bit about them, or let any of your loved ones take them if you had any control at all, shame on you. Shame on you. And I'm going to say that because you're going into medicine. Endorphins you produce naturally are opiates, and they're 1,000 times more powerful than heroin. You produce this neurotransmitter that is more powerful than heroin as a pain reliever. Humans live in a hostile world. We are animals. We have grown up and we have evolved on a hostile planet and a hostile world. Sometimes we couldn't outrun the predator, and it would get us. Sometimes we go through periods of famine where we're starving to death. We have built-in mechanisms to keep us from having too much pain. And that built-in mechanism that keeps us from having too much pain are these endorphins and enkephalins. Now, I'm going to tell you something about these endorphins. Some people are so sensitive to their own endorphins, they become addicted to their endorphins. Exercise fanatics, you know some? You've heard that when your runners will hit the wall and then they could run all day after that. You know why? Because of endorphins. It feels good when you are pushing yourself. You know why it feels good? And when I say it feels good, I don't want you to think of it like whatever, but it's because you are getting these endorphins which do mask any kind of pain issue with you. I'm actually shocked, and you all know that in the last 2 decades there's a lot of problems, and it's just tragic. with people in our society, because especially young people that are not handling their stress, they're doing self-harm. You know, whether it's cutting or whether it's food, you know, whatever, you know, starving or bulimia, whatever, anorexia or bulimia or both, or like I said, cutting or tattooing. There's, you know what we know is happening when somebody's getting a tattoo? They're thinking about their next tattoo.
Yeah.
It's true.
You know why? Because when they're getting their tattoo, guess what's being released? Endorphins. And they're thinking about their next one. It's just like me eating a cookie. I'm already thinking about the next one. You know, like, where is it? Am I out? You know, like, can you also have sugar addictions?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I am just letting you guys know that I'm actually shocked there's not more people who get addicted to their own endorphins. Here's the problem when somebody is being prescribed OxyContin, hydrocodone, some of these other things. What happens to your own ability to produce your own natural opiates? Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. Let me tell you, in medicine, and I know this from, you all don't have to believe me, but there's been 2 patients that I have seen that truly needed, 2 types of patients that needed opiates. And it's 3. And it's sometimes it's end of life. But the other 2 that weren't, the end of life, because of people who have like end-stage emphysema, they're suffocating on air like little fish that have been flopped up on a bank. They can do that for the last 2 years of their life. If their heart doesn't give out, by God, they suffocate dozens of times a day for the last 2 years of their life. And the only thing that can relieve them of feeling like they're suffocating is this morphine or opiates. But the problem is that's depressing their respiratory. So what you're doing when you give them that, you're relieving them from the panic feeling of suffocating, but you're also accelerating the end for them. But the 2 patients are certain types of terminal cancers that hit the bone or hit areas that cause intense pain. They should be getting those. And then also sicklers in crisis. A sickler in crisis is in excruciating pain. Anybody who twisted an ankle or is recovering from surgery or is doing that doesn't need it. You can say I said that and not care, but that's the truth. They don't need it. And it's not helping them. And you know, you're going to be in, how many of you on the floors, they give it, they actually, patients sometimes don't even ask for it. They're giving it to them. Y'all better be worried about it. You had best be worried about it because it's wrong. It's not the right way to treat. It really isn't. And we're knowing that. Those people that are actually understanding pain management know it. And we've known it for a long time. But that's not what's happening. Patients are demanding what they want, right? It's really sad. It is very sad how many people are addicted to opiates. So, but you produce these. We are animals. We produce these. This is why you see people, and I know, I got Julie here who's seen horrendous things. You'll see people that they won't even realize they had amputations and the trauma. They won't even realize that they have probably a life-ending injury because their endorphins pushed out so hard that they're in no pain. Now, if they live through it, it's going to hurt a lot the next day, you know, right? But the endorphins pushed out so much, their natural endorphins, that they felt nothing. They felt nothing. Have you seen that, haven't you?
We were watching the old Western, and his man got shot when they were trying to get the bullet out. Because we didn't have, think about it, back then, they didn't have none. Mm-hmm. So you had to go through that pain.
Yeah.
While doing it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And pain can actually, too much pain can put somebody in shock. Mm-hmm. Now, it's really true. Too much pain can put somebody in shock. But typically what happens is if somebody's in too much pain, they'll pass out. Mm-hmm. So, you know, but we are all about numbing in this society. We're all about numbing everything. So just saying. So you're going to know about these major ones that I've just talked about. I'd also like you to put down on your list GABA. GABA stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. So let's call it what? GABA, okay? GABA is actually an inhibitory, it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it actually slows the process of action potentials down. And when we talk about neurotransmitters exciting in the postsynaptic cell, don't you understand that you also have to have mechanisms in place that cause the opposite, right? Because we talked about this negative feedback. You can't just stay in positive feedback. You have to have a way of controlling. And I also want you to understand that some of these neurotransmitters that we talked about, let's look at epinephrine as one. Epinephrine, we said, causes fight or flight response. We said it increased respirations. It does that. One of the ways it's doing that too and helping with that is that it relaxes and opens the airways. So please keep in mind that wherever the target is, you might have completely, from the same neurotransmitter, you might have completely different reactions. Let me tell you this about acetylcholine. Acetylcholine does what to skeletal muscle? Excites. But guess what it does to cardiac muscle? Slows it down. We're going to find out there's a cranial nerve, the vagus pair of nerves, that secrete acetylcholine to our visceral organs. And that vagus nerve secretes acetylcholine in the pericardial region if it's stimulated. And when it secretes it in the pericardial region, the heart rate slows down. So it always depends on the target for what that neurotransmitter and or hormone, neurotransmitter is actually doing. Does that make sense? And there's some that are going to excite. There's some that are going to inhibit. There's some they're going to be able to do both. It would just depend on where the target site was that you were talking about. Okay. Any questions for me right there? This is kind of what this is talking about. And let's see. All right, so some of the actual, and see, this is that gamma aminobutyric acid. I told you GABA, right? So they go into some great detail about exactly what's going on at the cellular level. Again, I'm not sure you'd ever be asked that, but you would need to sometimes know why GABA drugs are being given. Do you get what I'm saying? So, or that type of thing. So you would want to know. I'm going to go through some of them. But some of these pictures now should make so much better sense to you since we talked about this at a cellular level. It seemed like there was one other. I did want to just mention this. I told you that calcium homeostasis had better be normal in the normal range for 3 reasons. And it is true. You do need calcium for strong bones, strong teeth, right? But if calcium gets out of balance today, like I said, your bones and your teeth will be the same in the casket tonight if they were this morning. But why do you have to have your calcium in homeostasis all the time? What were those reasons?
For blood clotting.
For blood clotting.
For nervous system to function.
Nervous system to function. Muscle contractions. Remember the muscle part of the story? Yeah. The muscle contractions, right? All right, here's where I wanted to show you, just to show you about these. This is the presynaptic neuron, this is the postsynaptic neuron, and this is the synapse, the space. And we said we get that these neurotransmitters are being released here. This one is showing you acetylcholine. And we know there are receptors on that postsynaptic cell that are going to take that in. And sodium will pour in, and what pours out? So y'all know about that, and it won't matter what you're talking about. That's how action potentials are generated. But what we didn't really mention, but if you go back now and look at your muscle pictures that you see, you'll see this. For this presynaptic cell, and in skeletal muscles, that's a motor neuron, for this to actually get a signal to release this, what does it take to come into the cell? Calcium. So this is what really initiates nervous system communication, is this calcium being available at the right amounts for when it's needed for this to happen. You get what I'm saying? So this is just reinforcing that calcium also has to be balanced in the system. All right, so so great. Do you have any questions about that? All right, so we have obviously a lot of, okay. So I actually want to talk to you about something I think is kind of intuitive too, if you think about that. And this is this idea that depending on what the stimulus is and where the stimulus is generated, we have these different types of circuitry that's involved in that. So we have, sometimes we have the input coming in on a very specific neuron. This is representing a neuron. And see how this axon is ending here, and then the axon, you know those neurons, remember, ending here and here. So sometimes the signal comes in a very specific way, or it's generated at a very specific location, and then it diverges so that lots of other things are going to be affected by it, and lots of other communication is going to be affected by it. Sometimes the signals get sent and then it's going to converge. I'm not going to ask, this is just FYI, right? It's just FYI. Sometimes what's happening in our brains and even in the spinal cord is we get these reverberating circuits. When you all think about somebody's, I would say, Julie, give me your number because I want to text you later about something. She would give me her number, and in 5 minutes, am I going to know it? If I didn't write, no, probably not. Because not like back in the day, we would have had to remember it. See, that's one of the things you young people don't have to do anymore. But because y'all put things in and then you don't know the number, right? Because you put it in and you couldn't get it. But if you had to do something for short-term memory, this is a reverberating circuit. And if you had to do something, some things come in and they cause these parallel circuits. This is why I tell you all, is memorization learning. Are you going to be able to pull that information a year from now if you memorized it? No. So while you are studying, every content that you study, every theory, every whatever, even if it seems so foreign to you, try to connect it to something else that you know. Because if you can make connections, it's more likely that you can get to the information. Otherwise, you're just doing these little reverberating circuits. You're not going to be able to use it for critical thinking. And, it's just an uphill battle, right? So great. Any questions about that? So we talked about this. So immediate memory, the short-term memory that you can sometimes get reverberating circuits. But long-term memory is going to be very, very different, right? Some of the long-term memory is declarative, so you kind of just own information and you can do it. Some is procedural. How many of you learned how to type like really young and you just wonder now sometimes when you're typing how you know what you're doing? Like you can type without even thinking, right? So same thing as riding a bike or swimming. But of course we always knew how to swim because we were created in a wet environment. We only learned a fear of water. We could swim at birth, but we learned a fear of water. I'm not saying you should throw babies in the pool, but I'm just saying you don't at that point. But no, we learned that fear of water. Let me tell you what is not that type of memory is hula hooping. I could hula hoop for hours back in the day. Oh my God, how many of you hula hooped recently? How many of you would say you could hula hoop? Okay, so a lot more of you. Try it now. Actually, some of you look like you probably could. But that changes. That changes. That's one of those things, I swear, that changes. Okay? But anyway, so when we think about these circuits, no kidding, we understand that how I see Erin and I have a certain emotional thing of looking at her face, but not just looking at her face, I recognize her face, which is a certain circuitry. I get to her name, which is another one. I get to how I know her, from which class, which is another. Do you see how the pathways that have to happen to be created? And then we talked about these, like Alzheimer's, what happens is these pathways get blocked. So I think I did repeat a lot of stuff, but anyway, sorry about that. But in Alzheimer's disease, let me tell you, it is going to be of the cholinergic neurons, which are the ones in the brain that secrete acetylcholine, talking to the next one, helping us to get to names, functions, helping us to just, get to all this information. And these cholinergic neurons, the ones that secrete acetylcholine into the synaptic spaces to get the postsynaptic cell to work, it's in these neurons that the synapses become, I don't want to say occluded, but kind of, and plaques form. These plaque formations form, and so that they're blocked. And communication signals, those circuits are blocked and become blocked. And it's a progressive disease, isn't it? So you can see a few stats. This is a few years old now, these statistics, but I don't think it's changed a whole bunch. I would let you know that not all Alzheimer's is actually created equal. There's actually an inherited form of Alzheimer's that happens to people when they're really young, and the onset of it happens and it progresses rapidly, and death ensues shortly after. So that's a very different thing than when we're thinking about older populations. And here's what I also need you all to know. The only confirmatory test for, other than the genetic, other than the inherited genetic young version, when I say young, it's usually in the 40s. If this happens, it's usually like a 5-year lifespan. So, you know, or 40s or 50s. And so it happens quickly, comes on quickly, and kind of goes through quickly, and the person dies. But the other kinds, the only confirmatory test is a brain biopsy looking at these plaques. So let me say this to you. Most of you don't know anybody who truly, that you know 100% has Alzheimer's, because they have not undergone a brain biopsy.
Why is that? I mean, they have MRI machines that can see through your brain.
They
I
can,
don't get it.
yeah, but it's still, other things can lead to things. And so what they do is they look for certain markers, and they say, well, if you have like 4 of the 7, we're going to say that this is Alzheimer's and treat it such as Alzheimer's, but is there a treatment? No. Or is this a progressive disease, right? So, but there are a lot of things. Please understand the term dementia. Dementia means that you've lost some of the mental acuity or mental facilities, right? But it is not a diagnosis. There are many, many, many things that can cause dementia. Alzheimer's is just one of them. Just one. Normal pressure hydrocephaly. What's hydrocephaly? Water on the brain. Normal pressure hydrocephaly, which can happen as we age, and it's not uncommon. This is one in the last few years. It's just getting recognized. And anybody, I'm telling you, anybody who's gotten a diagnosis for Alzheimer's that has not had that checked, that's kind of a crime, because when they can treat that, the dementia symptoms go away almost immediately. So normal pressure hydrocephaly, syphilis, late stage syphilis. If you got somebody that's showing signs of confusion in your ER, check them for syphilis.
Like my grandma, when she would get confused if she had a UTI.
Urinary tract infections. Urinary tract infections are a huge cause of people having confusion. Like, they can really show signs of dementia. And that's going to be because of the kidneys being infected, toxins building up, and with toxins that interfere with how neurons are communicating. Of course they would. And so you'll see people come in that, you know, and the sad thing is, you know, if it's an older patient and they come in, they may not have the signs of urinary tract infection. They may not, their urine might look okay, but when you test it, it's infected. They don't have frequency, they don't have pain with urination, they may not have any of that, but they can have a urinary tract infection and they're seeing Santa Claus in the corner and it's July, you know, or they're 60, 70, 80 years old and they think they're in labor, you know, so they're confused. Yes.
So is dementia like the catch-all term for?
It's just a catch-all term, but it's not a definitive diagnosis. So when somebody says, this is why I get a little, when people say I'm anemic or I've got, that's not a diagnosis. Somebody should find out why, you know, and actually see if they can get to a definitive diagnosis. I'm not telling you all to go out and anybody you know who has a family member with Alzheimer's to get them to have a brain biopsy. I'm not saying that. But I do think that it's, you know, other major things get ruled out. That's how they diagnose Alzheimer's. They're usually ruling out other things. And they rule out other things and they say, okay, well, then we think it's probably Alzheimer's. So, anyway, Parkinson's disease. I want you to know Parkinson's disease is a disease that is actually of the dopamine releasing neurons in a very select area of the brain. Now, not the areas for behavior and for the feel-good type of thing, but the area of the brain called the substantia nigra is the area of the brain, and it's not up here, but it's called the substantia nigra. And in this particular area of the brain, this is where we release dopamine to prevent unwanted motor contractions. Did I tell you that your skeletal muscle is under voluntary control? Well, what would happen when it wasn't, if it ever becomes not under voluntary control? What can happen? Like contractions, unwanted contractions, right? So these are some of the things that can initially show that. And Parkinson's disease is such a varying disease, because some people can have it and they know they probably just didn't get diagnosed for years, but probably it been coming on really slowly. Other people can have it and their symptoms, become really acute quickly, right? And then some people progress so rapidly that they go from being very active, like running marathons, being active, to in wheelchairs, can't even feed themselves or communicate. So anyway, some of the treatments. Now, I really don't think too many people are getting MAOs now, because that'll kill you if the disease doesn't. But anyway, L-DOPA is given. And we did just find out in medicine just not long ago that L-DOPA accelerates the progression of the disease, but it's still kind of the best bet that they've had. Now, what is being done, and it's pretty exciting, there's two things not really on the horizon. One of these things is being done now. Our VA hospitals were the guinea pigs for it, our veterans were. But anyway, this is deep brain stimulation. So they will implant electrodes deep in the brain, and you have an external stimulator that can control how much stimulation is going to those areas. And people have had this done effectively where they couldn't feed themselves or talk. But as soon as the electrode stimulation was where it needed to be, within minutes, the tremors stopped and they could get out of the wheelchair. That's a beautiful thing. The problem comes in with actually planting the electrodes, and that's a deadly thing. So you can imagine that somebody who would agree to go through that would be someone who's pretty much lost so much quality of life. And they make that decision that they'll go through something that's that dangerous. But anyway, and also another thing that's been done, and it seems like it's having some really, for a long time, it seemed like it has really good effects. But in this country, it's so limited because research is so limited with this, is stem cell replacement. Stem cell replacement therapy. And this has had, and trials, great, it looks like really some promising, great effects. But it's just limited, and it takes a long time to go through the channels, and research is not, whatever. But we wish we had unlimited funds to go into research for diseases and disorders. But the fact is, there aren't unlimited sources, so people have to decide where money goes for research, right? Anyway, so Parkinson's. Does anybody know anybody who has Parkinson's? Y'all do? How are they doing? Are you doing?
93.
93. So when did he get diagnosed?
5 or so years ago.
Yeah. So you know what you see, and I don't know if y'all would agree from your experience, but what you tend to see with this is like a lot of other things, that the younger the person gets diagnosed with these diseases, usually the worse the disease is. If somebody is older and gets diagnosed with some of these diseases, oftentimes that disease isn't even going to be what takes them out. You know what I mean? It'll be something else first. But not always. How old is your person?
She's in her 80s.
Oh, so older and well. So yeah, Parkinson's is fairly common. Okay. All right, guys. Do y'all need a break, or are we good? A break? Some people say so. 10 minutes. Can we do 10 minutes and come back? Stand up and jump around or something. no THC, but stand up and jump around. Okay, that was a joke. So, continuing on with this spinal cord. Okay, so we're just going on, and y'all remember, y'all trust me now. If it's just what I talk about, some of this stuff is just FYI. I'm not going to test you on it. I didn't talk about it. Deeper insights, I'm not going to test you. Okay. So we said that the central nervous system is the spinal cord and the brain, right? But then we said there are these nerves that are coming into the spinal cord and brain and going out of the spinal cord and brain. And these nerves, there's 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and there's 31 pair of spinal nerves, correct? So we get that these are referred to as the peripheral nervous system, right? When we talk about those nerves that are coming off the spinal cord. So when we think about the functions of the spinal cord, maybe it kind of makes sense that this is going to be the central nervous system tissue that's conducting, sending information up to the brain, and there's pathways coming back down and sending information out. I want you to have a general idea of what a reflex is. How many of you do vital signs that you check people's reflexes? Yeah? Yeah, so some of you do. But reflexes, what I would want you to know, and this is a textbooky kind of definition where they say they're stereotypical involuntary response to stimuli. So you know, whatever. That's a textbook definition, isn't it? But what it means is that these are going to be expected outcomes from certain stimuluses that are received. They're expected outcomes. So if somebody has depressed reflexes, would that be of concern? Or if somebody has exaggerated reflexes, could that also be of concern? So what you have to learn is that we do have these stereotypical responses that we should have to certain stimuli. And they better be in the right range. If they're not in the right range, it could indicate metabolic disorders or even, anatomical issues where information's been blocked. But if there's too much, that could also indicate disorders and disease. So one of the first things that you think about if there's not something obvious hitting you in the face is metabolic disorders. And some of those can be thyroid conditions where you are either, your thyroid glands are glands that are, this gland is a large butterfly-shaped gland here in the neck. And this secretes hormones that control our metabolism. So if our cells aren't getting what they need to tell the metabolism to increase, could this depress their reflexes? If it's jacking them up, it can also be jacking them up, right? So again, these can be problems. Things like diabetes mellitus can actually affect these too. So can drugs, prescribed and illicit, can they do this as well? Yeah, absolutely, they can do this. And so doing a good reflex check is going to be important, and knowing how to do them, and you learn how to do them when you are in clinicals and you're doing head-to-toe assessments. That's part of it, the neurological reflex things. So reflexes are protect, and their function is to protect. So I didn't even give that part. So the function of reflexes is to protect. Is to protect us. Okay, so here we're looking at the spinal cord. I would want you, and it's actually kind of a no shade color in here, but I would want you to know the spinal cord typically ends around L1. What do I mean when I say L1? The first lumbar vertebra. So it ends around L1. Did you all see that? Oh, actually, I think it might be you again. Did y'all see where they have a new mechanical? They're working on like a new mechanical thing where it can actually, instead of a doctor having to feel, did I tell y'all that your spinal cord, all the spines on your vertebra are different? Mm-hmm. So now for somebody to do a lumbar puncture or to administer an epidural, they have to be able to feel those spines. I want y'all to take a look at those spines. They're not a whole lot different, you know what I mean? And you're having to feel through skin and muscle. And has anybody ever seen a lumbar puncture done or an epidural? Okay, so you've seen them do this. You've seen, yes, you've seen them maybe feel for this, these, and you've got a little baby, they're the easiest ones to do. I know people are like, oh, it's a little baby. No, they're the easiest ones to do because you can see theirs. You can actually see it outside. But for adults, it's getting tricky. But now they have this mechanical little thing that's actually can measure. And they're measuring these echo distances that can kind of tell which one they're at. So this is going to help a lot with administering epidural meds. Hopefully, it's going to administer. So y'all have probably all heard of people getting epidurals, and they have to go below L1. They don't want to go anywhere near where there could be the spinal cord. So they go below, they feel that when they go below it. But then knowing the depth is going to be really kind of tricky too, the depth of it, to get into the epidural space, because they don't want to go too deep. And if they're too superficial, when they put that med in, is it going to work? No. So, you know, it can be kind of tricky. And y'all probably know people who haven't, who it hasn't worked for. So when we're talking about the spinal cord and the brain, we know we have these membranes that actually encapsulate and enclose the spinal cord and brain. So we have these three membranes. They're called what? They're called meninges. These three membranes are called meninges. Now they're over not just the spinal cord, but also the brain. And I would want you to know, well, this isn't a great picture. We're going to see them better when we get to the brain picture, and you can see them better. I've got a human brain here that y'all can see when we get to the brain. And the human brain that we have still has the innermost, the deepest meninge attached is actually sitting on the brain. It's called a piomata. The one that's attached to the skull cap, and those of you who've hunted or done it, you maybe killed your own meat at home on the farms or whatever, y'all have seen when skull caps are removed, there is this tough, fibrous, it's a translucent looking, thick kind of layer. That's the dura mater. And then between the dura and the piomata is the arachnoid mater. So these are all membranes that are encompassing, encapsulating, compartmentalizing, protecting, you know, doing all this for the spinal cord and the brain, right? So you would want to know these three. You would want to know these three membrane layers. Spina bifida. Spina bifida is a neural tube defect. And when I say a neural tube defect, does anybody know anybody with spina bifida? I have somebody in my other class who's got a sister with spina bifida that's is a young adult right now in a wheelchair. So let me tell you about neural tube defects. Y'all probably have seen, I've got Discovery Channel and lots of things, how the embryo develops. And when the embryo is developing, initially, when the embryo is developing, that ectodermal layer, the brain and spinal cord are completely open. It's completely open. And you can see the hemispheres of the brain. And then finally, it starts to get closed in, right? So as it's closing in, neural tube defects are problems that happen that sort of mess up that process, and they don't close. So, like, I don't know if this child would have ended up making it or not, but if this child did make it, there would have been dozens of surgeries and complete paralysis, no movement. This child would not have ever come out of a wheelchair, would never have crawled or walked, right? So, and this would have taken just so many surgeries and so much stuff, and certainly catheters, you know, completely having catheters and all of that. So this would have been a lot. Let me tell you about spina bifida and other neural tube defects. They're preventable. Now, if that doesn't give you chill bumps looking at that picture and knowing that they're preventable, and we know how to prevent them, then you weren't listening. They're preventable. People who know they're going to plan a family, females should start taking folic acid, B12, B complexes several months before they even decide to conceive. But if they don't, and they conceive and find out they're pregnant, then that you can prevent this by taking those in the first trimester and taking them throughout. Those prenatal vitamins aren't just because somebody wants to prescribe something. It can prevent this. By the way, a little glass of orange juice has enough in it. A daily little glass of orange juice has enough in it to prevent this. this. Now, it's recommended that you start before you would even conceive, because, you know, people do know how they get pregnant. You know, I know people say, well, that was just no, people know. And as far as failures of contraception and whatnot, there are failures, but oftentimes it's very predictable why the failures happen. It's human. There are failures. So somebody's on oral contraception, but they also went on an antibiotic. Or they're on oral contraception, but they don't take it the exact same time every day. They're just things that you can predict. So when you hear about those kind of things, they really are, you know, usually traceable. So this is why, you know, if somebody's really being careful, they're probably doing a couple things, right? Not just one. And certainly as medical professionals, you would make sure you know for your young women that are on any kind of contraception, what the contraception is, so that if they get put on a medication that could disrupt it, they would know that they not only have to do something else that month, but also the following month, right? To ensure whatever. But planned pregnancies could completely prevent this. Good prenatal care. The 20-week ultrasound can diagnose this in utero, and it can be surgically repaired. Let me say that again. This can be surgically repaired in utero. And when that fetus is born, becomes a neonate, there won't even be a scar from the surgery. Now, is there risk of surgery in utero? Certainly there is risk of surgery in a utero, so you're taking a risk. But that 20-week ultrasound should catch this if it has occurred. And this child could actually, with surgery, have lived a normal ambulatory life. Not that this child wouldn't have a normal life, but you know what I'm saying, a normal physical ambulatory life with surgery. Does anybody have any comments or want to say anything? So anyway, this is all such good news. There's also some things that can happen called anencephaly, where fetuses will not have a developing brain. And so they will be delivered, but obviously would only live for a few minutes without a brain, a functioning brain. Again, much of this can be prevented. All right. Poliomyelitis and ALS. I want you to know that poliomyelitis is actually a viral, polio is a viral illness. How many of you know anything about polio you'd like to share? Anybody? No? Okay. Right. That sounded a little bit like me saying about pregnancies can be planned. So, no, but right. But right. And actually, polio is a viral illness that it causes motor paralysis. So what it can do is sometimes lead to paralysis of appendages, but so you can't walk or you have something that way. But it can also lead to paralysis of the respiratory muscles. So if that's the case, a person who has polio, it's going to have to go into an iron lung, right? Now, y'all could look at this, the numbers of this for the dates, but in this country, one of the last polio outbreaks that occurred was, many decades ago. And when it occurred in areas like this area, this actually happened. Y'all know Randolph Henry High School? Mm-hmm. Randolph Henry High School, the gymnasium became an iron lung facility. So they brought in iron lungs there because so many people in the community, surrounding communities, had it enough that they were needing them. That's where they were being treated. So there are polio immunizations. So y'all have never had to have that in your reality, have you? No. Never have you had that in your reality, because we have polio immunizations. It is possible that in the next few years there will be eradication of polio. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, along with the World Health Organization and CDC, has in place and trying to implement to go in, get volunteers to go in to areas where the last few little pockets of polio is still existing, and getting enough people immunized that it protects the herd there, and that would stop polio. Polio is one of those viruses, and it's not that many that are like this, that are only in Homo sapiens. So if we can control it in Homo sapiens, we can do what? Eradicate it. So do you know how wonderful that would be? It would mean that your kids would not have to get polio immunization. So that would be one of the ones we could take off the table. The only human disease that has ever been eradicated was a viral disease, and it was in the late 70s, and that was smallpox. Smallpox was eradicated the same way, where enough volunteers went into communities and they immunized enough people that smallpox went away, and it's gone. That doesn't mean we don't still have stores of it in some of our facilities. CDC still has live smallpox. Russia still has live smallpox. Italy still has live smallpox in secured facilities. And when I say secured facilities, I'm talking about secured facilities. Because can you imagine if that virus, if some, and I'm going to say lunatic, got in there and got those viruses and spread it in the population, y'all would all be right mute. You would.
What's the point of having it?
They say the point of having it is that they're using it to still create vaccines, still learn about viruses, but also create vaccines. Our military personnel still get immunized for smallpox. I got immunized for smallpox. None of y'all did. Janie, you did, right? Mm-hmm. Janie's got her little, I was so proud of mine. Because it meant you could go to school. So when you were 6, you had to get this, because there was no kindergarten. But when you were 6, you had to get this small out, and I wanted it so bad to have my little scar. Because it meant I was old enough to be at school. What'd you say?
Is that the wrong one?
Yeah.
Or is that polio? Which one is
No, it's the wrong one.
Okay.
So it's and so anyway, so we even decades later, I would have a little bit, but most of us, most of y'all wouldn't. It would go through so quickly. It's so easily spread, and it's devastating. It has a high mortality rate. But even if you survive it, the scars. Y'all look up smallpox. Now, polio is also very easily, it's communicable, but not as easily communicable as polio, as smallpox was. Smallpox was respiratory borne. But anyway, polio, it causes motor paralysis, and it can lead to permanent ambulatory issues like with limbs and permanent paralysis and problems with that. But it can also, obviously, has a mortality rate, meaning some people die because of the illness because they can't breathe. And so it can do that too. That's polio. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, I would want you all to know is actually called, is actually more often referred to as Lou Gehrig's disease. Lou Gehrig's disease. Have y'all heard of Lou Gehrig? Yeah. He was so y'all know, he was a baseball player that was a pro baseball player. And back when he had Lou Gehrig's disease, it was much more rare. It's way more common now than when he had it. But he brought this disease kind of to the public's attention. And it is a progressively terminal disease, which means that if you don't get killed from something else, you're going to die from it. And it's usually within 2 years. 2 to 5 years is kind of your best bet. 5 years is the outside. Now, you will on rare occasions hear people who go past that, but usually it's 2 to 5 years. And it's a progressive paralysis that does not affect the sensory neurons, but does affect the motor neurons. And until the only thing that's moving are the eyes. So it just is progressively paralyzing. And typically what happens when people become immobile is that they start to aspirate. Sets them up for so much risk of pneumonias. So a lot of times people end up dying from pneumonias or other issues, even before this. But it is fatal. All right, any questions about Lou Gehrig's? Okay. The anatomy of a nerve. This is just kind of FYI. You're seeing the spinal cord, and you're seeing how these nerves come off. If you ever hear about a ganglion region is actually where the bodies of the neurons aggregate together. So it looks like a swollen area of a of a nerve. But is it a swollen area of the nerve, or is that just the anatomy? Because you're seeing where all those somas are. Do you remember what a soma is? Is the cell body of a neuron. So you've got all of them there. So that's why it kind of looks like this. So you'll hear about the ventral ganglion and dorsal ganglion. But anyway, it's just that that's where it here. So that's where you see that. And I don't really go too much into that. If you had, okay, so I'm going to come back to shingles. But if you had a chart, you could take these spinal nerves, and what do we mean by C1 and C5? So yeah, so it's talking about cervical vertebra, right? So these nerves that are coming off. And you can actually go to a chart just to see which areas of the body they innervate, right? So very up high are ones that even innervate, not just the neck, but to do with breathing. And this is why you hear about neck fractures that are high, like C1 and C2. What did that person often lose? The ability to breathe. So if somebody has that kind of break and they don't have somebody close by that knows what they're doing, they're going to suffocate before they get anywhere, right? Before they can be put on a vent. So this is why you kind of hate to hear about high neck breaks. C5 to T1. So brachial means what? Brachial means arm. And so you see that. So I'm not going to ask you these. This is just FYI. You could go to a chart and look at it. But this is how neurologists and other, people who are, or people who are having pain or whatever, this is how they figure out, maybe what area of the neck might be involved with this, right? Or if they know the area of the neck that's involved, why they may be having tingling or, wherever it might be. The largest nerve is the sacral nerve, the sciatic. Y'all heard of the sciatic nerve, haven't you? And it innervates the entire, there's a right one and a left one, but it innervates the entire lower part of the body. So maybe it also makes sense that people have a lot of problem with this because that lumbar region is having to withstand so much pressure, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So this is one that we often see people have issues with the sciatic nerve. I think you have a deeper insight about that. So y'all will end up looking at that. Guys, shingles. I want you to know that shingles is from a virus called the herpes, human herpes virus 3. It's called, the actual name is the varicella zoster. It's in the herpes family. Like I said, it's a human herpes virus 3. But anyway, varicella zoster causes chicken pox. How many of you had chicken pox? Or how many of you have seen people with chicken pox if you didn't have them? The others. So some of you haven't seen chicken pox and you haven't had chicken pox. Bless your hearts. Okay. All right. So anyway, and that's actually a good thing because that's telling me that people are probably getting immunized, and sooner or later people aren't even going to know what that looks like that somebody has chicken pox. This virus is a respiratory borne virus. So is it easily communicable? Okay, so now I'm not talking about shingles. I'm not talking about shingles right now. I'm talking about chicken pox virus. This virus, varicella zoster, when somebody first encounters it, it is going to be respiratory borne. So easy. I can sneeze right now and Aaron be sick in 2 weeks. And it takes about 14 to 21 days. Hey, but guess what's happening during those 14 to 21 days when she's coughing and sneezing and touching doorknobs? She's spreading it too. So it's very easily contagious, isn't it? And so anyway, and it has a mortality rate associated with it. Y'all might not know anybody who ever died from chicken pox. I personally don't know anybody who ever died from chicken pox. And I worked in infectious disease at UVA for many years. And I never saw anybody die from chicken pox. But it does have a mortality rate. Some do die. And if you're that one, you don't really care about statistics. If you're that one that has that one child who dies from chicken pox, you don't care that it was rare, do you? You care that people didn't get immunized when you had a child who was compromised and they walked around with chicken pox. Again, immunizations, saving lives, really saving lots of lives. But anyway, let me tell you what else it saves from. There's a condition known as shingles, and this is how we come back to these spinal nerves and cranial nerves. when somebody has chickenpox, this virus, this is one of the viruses that you do not get rid of. You okay, Jess? You do not get rid of this virus. It stays in your system forever. So it's going to live, though, in those ganglion that I told you about. This virus will end up going through one of these nerves because the immune system can't get to these neurons. So it goes to one of these nerves and it lives in those ganglion dormantly, which means asleep, kind of, for the rest of your life. About a third or a little bit less of people who've ever had chickenpox. How many of you have had chickenpox? About a third will develop shingles. And what happens in shingles is that the virus is there in those ganglion and it wakes up. And it comes just along that nerve, whatever nerve it might be, whichever one it might be. And it's going to cause this superficial rash, but vesicular rash. And, you know, it's painful because it's the nerve that's involved. Way more painful than the chickenpox were when you had it, because this is a nerve involved. And how many of you have ever had really nerve pain? It's different. It's a whole different ballgame. So this virus will come out along a nerve. You know, oftentimes it's the back and it'll wrap around, or it's in, you know, it's one of the cranial nerves. It can go down into the eye. It can be a problem. So that's called shingles. You cannot give shingles to someone else. You cannot. Shingles is not contagious. But someone who has shingles in their vesicles, even before the vesicles erupt, they are shedding this virus. It would take direct contact for someone who'd never been exposed to that virus to get chickenpox, but it could be given to someone with direct contact. It's not like somebody who has shingles is going to sneeze and a baby in Walmart is going to end up getting chickenpox from them. Do you get what I'm saying? But direct contact. But this is why, you know, they tell people, like, sometimes caregivers are older people, sometimes grandmothers or mothers, but, you know, whatever. And so they'll say, if you have a shingles outbreak, make sure it stays covered, that the whole area stays covered whenever the child, and good hand washing. What's the best thing we can do to prevent disease? Hand washing. And then that child's probably going to be okay, but hopefully the child also eventually get immunized. But you get what I mean?
So what does the shingles vaccine, that leaves it dormant?
So the shingles vaccine, and there's a new one that's out now. And so people who even had the old one are being recommended to get the newer one. The shingles vaccine is actually teaching your immune system so that if that virus does come out, it can stop it. You get what I mean? So you wouldn't even know that it was, because it's going to stop it before it starts. It's going to try to create an environment that you won't ever get shingles. It's not like it's getting rid of them, though. You can't get rid of them. You cannot get rid of them. It's just producing a response in your body that if that virus came out, you would be ready for it, so you would never really get a sign or symptom of it. Or hopefully, if you did get it, it would be much lesser than it would have been. Because, you know, shingles, most people, and only a third of people would get this that have had chickenpox. But on a rare occasion, and the percentage is low, of the people who get shingles will get what is called herpetic neuralgia. And y'all would want to know that this is herpetic neuralgia is going to mean that it's going to be permanent nerve pain because of this herpes virus, this herpes animal virus. And that nerve pain is debilitating. And it doesn't go away in 6 weeks that the shingles goes away. It stays. And it's deep, and people can't sleep. It affects their appetite. And guess what happens to their overall health when they're not sleeping or eating? You can see a spiral downward happening. I have seen it in patients that had.
So this happened after you get the shingles?
After you have shingles. It doesn't happen to everybody who has shingles. It's rare, but it's rare. It's called post-herpetic neuralgia. Neuralgia is just a term that means nerve pain. That's just a word that means nerve pain. Okay? but this is post-herpetic, which is going to be after shingles. And people had, I've actually known patients who died from that. It took maybe a year or two, but they've died from that because it's so effective. And people, one of those people were very active, was a very active gentleman who was in his late 70s. I mean, he did everything. But he ended up getting shingles. I treated for, did the shingles. There's no real great treatment. But, went through the shingles, but never kept the herpetic neuralgia. And did not sleep, could not eat, could not cook. And ended up, that was the beginning of the end. So,
when you get shingles, are you more likely to get shingles again? Like, are you gonna have more? Is it like more of an outbreak?
I have never heard numbers, so I'm not going to say because I haven't heard numbers. You can get shingles again, but numbers are of shingles cases are there higher numbers of reoccurrences than initial. I don't know. I've never seen those numbers, so I'm not going to tell you. But there are people who can get shingles. I mean, some people do. I've known quite a few actually that did. So just in my own very limited experience, I'd say, yeah, maybe most of them are recurring, but not really. I don't know that. So I don't know that for sure. Here's the thing. If you haven't had chickenpox, get immunized. Here's another thing and to think about. Women who have never had chickenpox and are not immunized and are pregnant. The chickenpox virus is devastating to an embryo and fetus. Devastating. So they're going to be most, whether y'all agree with it or not, and that's fine if you don't, and I don't care. But most medical professionals are going to tell a woman who has chickenpox during her delivery, during her gestation. Now, not at the end, because that does not happen. That's all propaganda that you heard, okay? Not at the end of the pregnancy, but if it's in the first trimester or early on, they're going to advise to stop that because the fetus is going to be devastated by that virus. And so whether you want to do it or not, it's up to you. Nobody's going to make you. People aren't making people have abortions, That's always I don't know why that just makes me nervous that people think these things. They're just like repeating misinformation. So anyway, it's going to be a huge conversation. The thing that happens, and you do have to make sure you're at a place that people do know what they're doing. And second opinions are always a nice thing to have. I know somebody who was told they had chickenpox during delivery, during gestation, but it worked. There are a lot of things that can look like chickenpox, right? There are a ton of things. So, but there's easy ways to test it. Blood testing, easy ways. So, anyway, any questions? Yes.
Does it cause like abnormal stuff towards the fetus?
Absolutely. It devastates the fetus typically, and y'all can just you can probably Google this and you'll see, but it's usually neurological and physiological.
Yeah. Well, when my mother was pregnant with me, they told her that she had chickenpox, and like
look at you, you're perfect.
When I was 6 months, they saw that I was forming a tumor or something on my head. It was some type of growing tumor that they had to take out.
Did they think it was related to that?
I have no idea.
Yeah. So again, it would depend on during the gestation period. Obviously, the earlier the gestation that somebody has a virus they're called teratogenic viruses. Y'all write down the word teratogen. Teratogen. Not all viruses are teratogenic. Some won't hurt your fetuses at all. Teratogenic viruses. Teratogenic. That means harmful to a fetus. Some viruses are harmful to a fetus. Some drugs are harmful to a fetus, aren't they? Alcohol. Is there any safe amount of alcohol when you're pregnant? No. one alcohol drink beverage has been linked to fetal alcohol syndrome, which means that that individual that's born after that will have a lifetime of consequences because of it.
So why back in the old days instead of
Because it was the old days, and they weren't better. And they weren't better. I'm not sure why people, back in the good old days, that's bullshit. They forget. They forgot. I have not forgotten. So, no, it was not better. They would say that, and guess what? I've had students tell me that they still can find physicians will say, oh, just to relieve your anxiety is worse for your fetus than anything, so a half a glass of wine will be all right. Get a new physician. That it's all well established that there's no such thing as any safe amount of alcohol. I had a student a couple of semesters ago who told me that her doctor, she told the whole class this, her doctor told her to keep smoking so her baby wouldn't get so big. Now, here's what I say. That was a lie, because I can't imagine that any doctor that has a license would be saying that. So I'm going to hope she was lying. Because that would mean, I didn't say this in the class, but I was hoping she was lying. Because if she wasn't lying, it meant that fool was telling other people that too. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not safe. You should not be smoking.
Doctors say don't stop cold turkey.
Don't stop cold turkey doing what?
Smoking.
Well, there's some things you can stop cold turkey because it harms you, and then that could harm the fetus. Stopping smoking doesn't hurt you. It might hurt your feelings, but it is not going to hurt you. Neither would stopping alcohol. You get what I mean? Unless you're such an alcoholic that you're having DTs. Now, as somebody, that is true. Some people can need the alcohol so much that DTs could then end up hurting the fetus. So you have to be very careful then, right? Just like if somebody's addicted to certain drugs that you can't stop cold turkey, because that would also be harmful, right? So I'm not talking about those though. I'm talking about people who just, smoking is not one of those. So, and to say to keep a fetus size down, that is just, that I am really praying that was a lie. So, okay. Have you all heard doctors say that? Have your doctors said that? Okay.
Okay. So when it comes to the chickenpox, like a pregnant woman who never had chickenpox, never had the immunization, can they get the immunization when they're pregnant, or no?
Yes.
Is it, okay.
Yes, they can. They can get it, and they usually are going to ask all that, encourage all that. Yes, they are. They can. So it would be, yeah.
Would that immunization go to the fetus?
No, it does not.
So that was not
people
like
think that fetal and maternal blood mix. They never mix.
No, I didn't.
No, I know you didn't. We're saying that, but they never mix. Only certain things can get across, and that's what I mean. Only certain viruses are teratogenic. That's one of the ones that are very measles, rubella, very teratogenic, incredibly teratogenic. If you know anybody who's deaf that's around my age, it's likely that their mother had measles when they were pregnant with them. That's because the measles was so common, right, and so contagious. It's one of those that just go through like wildfire.
Now they're saying the Zika virus.
The Zika virus. What'd you say?
When I was pregnant, that's when they were like.
Had you gone to one of those? Had you gone to
No.
Florida?
They asked. They were
Okay.
like,
Have you tried it? They asked you, had you tried it?
yeah.
So
that was before it was in Florida.
Yeah.
I remember it was like the winter.
yeah, it's
before.
more than just Florida now. It's in some of the southern states. The Zika virus is a virus that can cause microcephaly, so the brain doesn't develop like it should. And again, it's sort of devastating kind of consequences. But it would depend on when you got exposed. Your mother, if she truly did have chickenpox, I don't know if they actually did. It's just a blood test, but if they did and she had chickenpox, I would say that because you're sitting here looking as beautiful as you are and functioning, she was late in her gestation. If it's early, the earlier in the gestation, the more devastating it's going to happen, because all those tissues, all those organs are developing, aren't they? And that ends up becoming a problem. This is micro. We're talking about micro right now. Do y'all want to take micro? Okay. What'd you say?
I said, well, we have to.
Well, you're not
You'll
going
see
to
us.
think of it. It's like you have to. And I said, I get to take micro. Anyway, so very selfish singles. I spent more time on that. I wanted to, but are y'all good with that? Yeah. Okay, so we said you can go to charts and figure out these nerve plexi, if you will. You can see how they bundle here. And we have a lot of crossover, or not a lot, but we have some crossover. And if I were to get to some of this area, maybe that would make sense to you that some of these areas do crossover. So they're trying, sometimes when they do like saddle blocks and these kind of anesthesia things, they're having to, they kind of know where to go to hopefully get enough coverage for that. Do you see what I'm saying? And also you can sort of think about it is that this overlap, these edges, is that you don't have all your eggs in one basket, you know, so maybe if with injury to just one, you wouldn't lose complete. You know what I'm saying? Because there's some crossover. But anyway, that's just FYI there. Okay. And reflexes, what did I told you what I wanted you to know about the reflexes. I got a thing out y'all can do on Thursday. You can do reflexes, and you're also going to be, I think so after your test is done for the bones, muscles, and joints, we can sort of have fun with this with the nervous system. Y'all can test each other, the patellar reflex. Everybody's heard of the patellar reflex, right? So y'all can hit your neighbors with a hammer and you have permission to do it. Really easy. But anyway, you'll see these. You'll see the calcaneal reflex. What would you be testing? Calcaneal reflex. The heel pupil, right, with light. So you guys can do some of these reflexes in lab on Thursday. This withdrawal reflex makes sense too, because if you were to step on something that like glass, we've probably all done that before, it's horrible, isn't it? So you step on that and you immediately pull back, don't you? But your body, you don't have to, like, it happens in a microsecond that you're kind of doing that. But the reflex is not just helping you that you pull away from that, but it's also happening so that your body takes the weight on the other side, or otherwise you lift up and you fall down and knock your teeth out. So now you're double injured if you didn't have what? Yeah, reflexes. So if you didn't have reflexes, you'd be even worse, in worse shape. These reflexes, what they're also doing too, is when your ankle goes to turn, you know, because we do turn our ankles probably most every day in our lives, we turn our ankles. But when that is happening, and I'm just using the ankles as an example, but when that is happening, we have these reflexes from synergistic muscles that are pulling to keep it, the injury from being so bad. So what is unnatural, and I heard orthopedics talking about it, an orthopedic doc talking about this one time in a symposium, and I thought this makes so much sense. You know, in a natural situation, this rarely occurs that people hurt their joints and have these injuries. But we do things that have sudden movements for like athletics, and those sudden movements they can't compensate for. It's only, you know what I'm saying? Because we do have reflexes that would typically protect that so that you wouldn't overextend your joint. Remember the movements we talked about? And we talked about some areas that should never hyperextend, should they? They should never hyperextend, or they should never have lateral excursion, right? But sometimes that happens, and that's going to cause injury to the joints. But we have these built-in kind of Golgi tendon reflexes that can protect all that. When we talk about spinal cord injury, this is something that, you know, these numbers too are fairly recent. You know, just kind of horrible because we do tend to think about this as being permanent. Now, this is where our great paramedics come into play, because usually when this trauma happens, they know that a lot of times the initial trauma isn't even what's going to end up causing the permanent paralysis. What is? Yeah, well, that's true too. Like not knowing what to do, how to move them. That is absolutely true. But then also the inflammatory process that happens. So they know right away things to do like cooling, icing down, and cooling down, sometimes even replacing internally fluids and getting that person down to stop the inflammatory process. Because sometimes the swelling is going to end up doing the permanent damage more than the trauma did. So we've come a long way in understanding all of that, but still there's a lot that goes on here. They're doing things with stem cell replacements and you know, other treatments as well, trying to figure out how to get people back movement. But you know, this is kind of horrible. And y'all have a whole clinical insight on this, and so y'all can read this. Now, can we take another just little break? And we're not going to do a whole lot of this, but I do want to just start talking about the brain just a little bit. We're actually ahead of the game as far as I'm concerned. Y'all are not doing that, but we are. How would y'all like, though? Would you? We'll lecture a little bit more, but at the end, I am going to do a quick review for the test. Okay, the Thursday's test. I'll do we'll just talk about some of the things that I know you guys should be focusing on. Okay. We'll do that before y'all leave today, and then before you leave, we'll also go through the muscle story, skeletal muscle innervation, and you all can have a chance to write that down. How much of a break do y'all want? You're done. It's been on 24 hours. So, how much of a break do you want? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30. 5?
10.
I want 10 too. I'm thinking 10. Okay, I don't even know why I asked. I'm not even sure why I asked y'all. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I had some. Okay. I'm glad that wasn't. Okay. Enjoying the ride, right, Janie? So absolutely. But look, so the brain, let's talk about the brain for a second. I just want to introduce one thing to you, and then I'm going to stop for the day for the lecture for nervous system. And we're going to do a review for this test that's coming up. And I'll be available to you if y'all want to go through and really ask questions about your notes and stuff. So when we're looking at the brain itself, we can look at different aspects of it. This would be a superior view. So we're looking at it from above. Is that right? And we see that there looks like they're called hemispheres. And there's this right hemisphere and this left hemisphere. And are they symmetrical? Are they? So if there was a mirror right here, this one's mirroring this? No, they're really not symmetrical, really. And we talk about the neurons that make up the central nervous tissue of the brain as being plastic, and that there's this plasticity, right? And there's this ability to mold and whatnot. And actually, they really aren't symmetrical, the right and left hemispheres. And we know there's different functions that as the brain ages, different parts of the brain are going to take on different functions. But the younger the brain, the more plasticity there is in the brain. This is why you can have, you can be treating a child who's been in a car accident, who you are seeing the brain, you can see their brains, they end up losing huge parts of the brain. But they end up getting sometimes full function back. Mm-hmm. But if that same injury happened to someone who is an adult, is it likely to happen? No. So there's still so much we're learning about this, but this is a lateral view of the brain. So this is this is the frontal lobe. How would I know this is frontal lobe? What's this bone called? The frontal lobe. What do you think this lobe is called? How about that? What's this one? There you go. And what's this lobe? Right. So anyway, I'm just showing you pictures of the brain. But what I really want to do, and the only thing I want to talk about, and then ended up on this today, are the meninges. So I'm actually going to skip a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about meninges. We've already talked about the dura, the arachnoid, and the piamata, right? And we said that these are encapsulating, compartmentalizing, and enclosing the spinal cord and the brain. These meninges, they're really they're membrane. So have y'all heard of meningitis?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to tell y'all right now, I'm giving you a big hint that this picture is in your textbook. And if I were you, I would look at this picture in my textbook and I would make sure I understood that when we look at the brain tissue, and this again is the right hemisphere, this over here is the left one, you're going to see a very thin film of membrane that's actually sitting right on top of the brain. That's the piamata. Then you've got this arachnoid mata, and then you have this incredibly thick, what? Dura. So you really just have to know those three. I know there's other stuff on here, but you would really know those three, won't you? Right? Once you know that, you'll know it, right? But what I want to talk to you about is we had talked about there's some tissues that we learned that can't regenerate. And we said that neurons in the central nervous system are some of those tissues. They cannot regenerate. So do we want anything harming them? No, so we really kind of don't, because we know they rarely undergo mitosis. And with this thought in mind, I'll just introduce you to that. I think you've got a deeper insight that talks about brain cancer and brain tumors. Are brain tumors typically of the neurons in the brain? They're not, because they're not undergoing mitosis. And when are cells most at risk during mitosis? So those brain cancers are usually of the glial cells, aren't they? Because they're continuing to undergo mitosis. So just looking at some of this anatomy. But you have also heard probably of itis at the end of a word means what? Inflammation of the meninges. When we talk about inflammation, which one of the signs that we think about are symptoms of inflammation? What can happen? Swelling. So I got swelling of these tissues that are encompassing and compartmentalizing the brain. And this is a neuron that I know is dear, because it's not going to be able to be regenerated, and all of a sudden it's being pressed with this fluid. Does that sound like that would be a good thing for the neurons? No, that's just not a good thing for the neurons at all. So we do understand that. Now I want you to know that it's not a good diagnosis when somebody is thinking presumptive diagnosis. A presumptive diagnosis is what they have decided a person might have based on their signs and symptoms. So using a person's vital signs, using their history, looking a head-to-toe assessment, you use all that information with their signs and symptoms to come up with a presumptive diagnosis. If a presumptive diagnosis is meningitis, that's not a good thing, is it? But you're going to also need to figure out definitively, so that you know what you're dealing with, so that you know how to what? Treat. Because could you treat incorrectly? Yes. And then there's two things that can hurt you if you're treating ineffectively. What would be the two things that would make sense to you? Exactly. So you could be getting a drug that actually is hurting the person's own immune system response. If a person's sick, their immune system knows what they have. You might not know what they have, but their immune system knows. And is their immune system trying to treat it? Is their immune system trying to handle it? But if you treat it with the wrong thing, usually you're suppressing the immune response and you're not hitting what you needed to hit, right? So that's a huge problem. So now you handicap them. So now not only do they have the disease, you handicap them. And that was not something we want to do. So the signs and symptoms are going to typically be a stiff neck because of the swelling, a headache, like a serious headache, a stiff neck. With little kids, they don't know what you mean when you say you have a headache. They don't know what that means. So, does your head hurt? Does your head? They don't really kind of know what you're talking about. So you get them to do certain things. You say, "Can you touch your knee to your nose? Your nose to your knee?" It would be such an ugly thing if somebody asked me to do that right now. But little kids want to do things like that for you. But if you see that they can't do that, and it looks like they're not doing that, or if you're making sounds and they turn their whole body to do it and to see you instead of moving, then you're worried. Obviously, you're taking vital signs like temperature and all that stuff, and you're doing that too. And you can usually tell in somebody's eyes if they're in pain. You really can. You can tell if they're in pain. But asking a child if they're thirsty or if their head hurts, they don't know. They often don't know what you mean, right? So they don't know what those things mean. So you make sure children have plenty of fluids, don't you? You just push fluids in kids, and then you try to evaluate this other stuff. But anyway, adults matter too. Now, let me tell you this. The most common cause, and I want you all to know this, the most common cause for meningitis are viral causes. So viruses. And y'all, that's good news. I just told you meningitis is never good news. But the good news about it, if you're looking for a silver lining, is that the viral meningitis are typically have a much less mortality rate. Meaning, less people die when it's a viral meningitis than they do So anyway, so that's the good news about that. And the thing that you can do, the only thing that you can really do when somebody has viral meningitis is treat the symptoms. And, you know, so, I mean, that'll keep you busy enough, right? So treating the symptoms. And typically it will resolve as long as they have a healthy immune system. But some of these viral causes of viral meningitis, they have any infectious disease that we know has a mortality rate associated with it, but they're much lower than bacterial. So the rarest of all causes of meningitis is bacterial meningitis. And let me say this, without modern medicine, most die. Most. That would have been the mortality rate. It's nothing funny about that. I laugh when I get nervous. Okay, so I mean, it's horrible, isn't it? There's still, I'm gonna have to, I'll write these. Do you want me to write them on here in case you want to look at them on the, So what I want you to know is this. We do a lumbar puncture, which is people call it spinal tap, right? And when they do the spinal tap, they're looking at the spinal fluid, and spinal fluid should look to the eye, the naked eye on gross anatomy. It should look clear and colorless. That's what spinal fluid should look like. But of course, that's just with your naked eye. When it goes to the lab, there really should not be detectable red cells or white cells. Very low amounts of glucose and protein, so chemistry analysis get done on it, hematological analysis get done on it, looking for cells, and then it goes to the microbiology lab for cultures and for testing, direct testing. So because when somebody has a spinal tap done, looking at that cerebrospinal fluid, you're talking about minutes that can make a difference in getting the right treatment to them. If it's a bacterial meningitis causing this and you don't get them the right treatment, then you're talking about losing them. And it's just because you didn't do things quickly enough and do the right thing quickly enough. This is why if they really do suspect a bacterial meningitis, they're going to throw what we call big guns at them as far as like chemicals. When I talk about these big chemicals, these big guns, these drugs are dangerous. And I want y'all to hear that. Drugs are dangerous, but a bacterial meningitis is going to kill them if you don't treat. Now, would you rather treat them for specifically the bacteria that they have, though? So is it important to get a good specimen and get that specimen sent before 30 minutes is up, and get those results back as quickly as possible so that you can take them off of that Canon drug that you put them on and put them on the fly swatter drug? Do you know what I'm saying? If that's all that you needed, right? You know, y'all don't take a cannon and blow your kitchen up if you have a fly in there, do you? What you saying? No, we do that for mice, though, right? No, but I'm just telling you, that's how these drugs are. Are you with me on this, though? Are you with me on this? But let me tell you, as a medical professional, you're realizing that they come in and you think it might be bacterial meningitis, and you know they're dead unless you do something. And you're talking about minutes making a difference. So as soon as you get that CSF back, cerebrospinal fluid back, and it's looking like it's viral, what are you doing in the break room? You're thinking, oh God, okay, I can back up on that gentamicin I was going to give them that was going to kill them. You know, so you're happy that it's usually viral. Now, here's why I want you to know some of the bacterial causes. I want you to know them because there's one in particular that you as health professionals, you're at risk. So if a person has one of these bacterial ones and you come in contact with them, I don't care if you were in the elevator when they were in the stretcher going up to ICU, you're going to get prophylactic antibiotics. Anybody that was in any kind of contact with them are going to get prophylactic antibiotics. And you know what prophylactic means, right? Protection, just to be protected. So there's some that you would want to know about as health professionals, but most of them are just, I mean, it's the patient that you're worried about. So let me tell you about the number one cause of meningitis of a newborn. Okay, well that doesn't work. So the number one of the newborn is Streptococcus and it's the species. Species is always lowercase. The genus is always uppercase. Streptococcus agalactiae. This is also called Group B strep, GBS. This is the most common cause of meningitis, bacterial meningitis of the newborn. This is why when parents bring their babies to the emergency room for everyday care instead of a doctor's office, they're using the emergency room for this. If an emergency room, it's protocol in an emergency room. If they get a child under 3 months of age with a fever of unknown origin, they have to do a spinal tap. It is in their protocol. They're going to have to do a spinal tap. So does every baby that's 3 months or younger that has a fever need a spinal tap? No, but if you take them to the emergency room's going to have to do it because it's part of that protocol. This is why in the perfect world, people wouldn't have to use emergency rooms for that kind of care, right? But let me say this. So, this is a deadly bacterial cause for meningitis of the newborns. Where would a baby pick this up? How?
I don't know. I just remember getting tested for it.
Okay. So you made that connection. Some women carry this bacterium in their vaginal flora, part of their vaginal normal flora. I've talked about your normal flora as being your gardens that protect you. They're your gardens that protect you. Each of us has a unique garden. Do you know that? They're as unique as our fingerprints are. But there's some things that are pretty common. So some women carry group B strep as part of their normal flora in their vagina. And where do babies come through? What is really a vagina? The birth canal, isn't it? So women in that last trimester, again, good prenatal care, they will be tested. And if a woman is a carrier for GBS, typically in good care, they're going to get a prescription for an antibiotic. And if they get told, if they go into labor, start the treatment. Or if they get induced, they're going to give them a quick dose of antibiotic while they're in labor. Because this is a very sensitive organism. And in the woman, if the woman gets treated, it's going to knock the numbers down really low. That since that practice started, guess what's happened to our death of meningitis of our neonates with the numbers of the deaths? They have dropped drastically. You remember when I said about the old days weren't so great? Yeah, they have dropped drastically. Like I had chill bumps. Isn't that a great thing? Yes. You know, that's an amazing thing. So GBS is the neonates. Now toddlers. It's Haemophilus. This is a bacterium, Haemophilus. And by the way, even with treatment, when these neonates have this as a meningitis, even with treatment, the mortality rates are bad. Guys, so so we're so happy about these practices and people doing this. Haemophilus influenzae. These are like Latin spelling, genus and species names. But this is a bacterium. Please don't confuse the species name of Haemophilus influenza with the virus influenza. It's different. Okay, this is a bacterium. All right, so this is not a virus. This is a bacterium. Haemophilus influenza in the early 80s and 90s, we always had, UVA, we always had a child in the PICU. We at least had one. We usually had several that had this, meningitis from this. And the ones that lived usually had neurological permanent consequences from having it. They were either paralyzed in some way or lost their sight or lost their hearing or lost both. The ones that lived. So this is what we saw in toddler age. Now we don't because of what? What vaccine? The HIB vaccine stands for Haemophilus influenza serotype B. And since we've had that vaccine now, guess what's happened to our PICU numbers for this particular case? almost non-existent now, where we used to always have somebody in there. Isn't that amazing? They were not the good old days. They were not. Okay, now, young adults, which is most of you. Young adults. Neisseria meningitis. Neisseria meningitis. About 20% of the population carry this in the back of their throats. It's part of their. Don't make faces about bacteria, guys. We live in a bacterial world. We live in a bacterial, protozoal, fungal world. We are guests in their world. We really are. Now, about 20% of us have this in the back of our throat, but it's never going to cause us any trouble, we hope. But here's the thing. It can become an opportunistic pathogen, and you can certainly give it to somebody. And what we know about young adults is typically they have lifestyles that they are this just happens in young adults more than any other population. But we're usually in crowded conditions, you know, swapping drinks and ice cream cones, and you know whatever you might be swapping saliva with. You know what I'm saying? And swapping saliva in even more fun ways than that. Do you get what I mean? So you're in that, but at the same time, you're also stressed. And a lot of times what we know is young adults, especially in high school and college, are not eating well, they're not sleeping well. So what's happening to their immune systems? Their immune systems are just not great. So they end up getting this. This has crazy mortality rates. Like the number, if you don't treat it, you're done. But if you do treat it, you're still often done. So it's just crazy mortality rates. You'll see young adults who get this that survive that have lost every appendage because of DIC. All four. Sometimes. Or lost two, or lost whatever. So even the ones that survive sometimes have very devastating kind of consequences from this. Guess what we have? The meningovax. This is why it's recommended that it's now being pushed back to age to middle school. It's recommended that middle school, high schoolers get the meningococcal vaccine, right? And certainly by college. But if you go to a four-year college, you can't even go to a four-year college until you've been shown you have this vaccine. Saving lives, these vaccines are. They really are. Okay. And then the one that can be in any age group, and right now is actually, but I'm expecting the numbers of this one to go down. And again, Latin spellings here. This is Streptococcus pneumoniae. And obviously, what do you know it causes? This bacterium, pneumonia. But it can also cause what? Meningitis, right? Meningitis. So these are not the streps that cause strep throat. They are not. It's not the same species that causes strep throat, guys. It is not. So, but this one can cause pneumonia, but it can also cause other things like middle ear infection, conjunctivitis, but it can also cause meningitis. And it can hit any age. And right now, this is the one, because of these being immunized for, treated for, this is the one that's kind of taking over now, being the highest in our numbers. But I'm expecting that to go down because there's something being given now as part of the pediatric protocol called the pneumovax. And the pneumovax can protect against certain serotypes of this. And so we're going to start seeing those numbers go down too. Because it's not just, this used to be, this immunization was recommended for people over 60, and it still is. But it's also now part of the pediatric protocol as well. So this we're going to expect to see those numbers go down. And what you can expect when you go back and you look at some of this literature, and you look at some of these statistics, those numbers represent saved lives. That's what they represent. So you think about that. Anyway, so these are bacterial. Now, this is the one that if you have a person come in contact with you that's a patient, and they know that they came in contact with you while they were coming in or on your squad or doing whatever, you have to be treated for this, even if you had the vaccine. They're going to give you a prophylactic dose or two of an antibiotic to treat you. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about meningitis. Now obviously that's the bad news about meninges, but the meninges usually are protecting us, aren't they? And so they're usually perfect and they're protecting us. Any questions for me? Okay. All right, so that'll be all the lecture, I think, today, because that's enough. Do y'all think that's enough?
Yes.
All right, then. All righty. Pause recording.